everyone, and welcome to the Policy and Services Committee. And we are here in, you know what happens at this end? It echoes a little. It's kind of strange. Woo. We are all here tonight, and would you call the roll?
Holman? Here. Klein?
Here.
Nis?
Here.
Price? Here. 4 present.
Okay, thank you. So tonight, I'm going to suggest that we alter the agenda just a little, and welcome to our city manager, who has just walked in, and that we take up the naming of the main library first, and that we then go on to the benefits audit, and that we finish off on the boards and commissions and report. So if nobody has any complaints about that, I would ask Monique if she would come and join us at the table. So in front of us tonight, we have a discussion and consideration of a recommendation to the council, the renaming of the main library. Monique, I know you're going to give us some background on that, but the main library is under construction. I don't know when it's due to be done exactly, but I imagine before Mitchell Park. So if you want to give us some background on this, this has been on the docket. It went through the committee, went through the library committee actually last year, more than 14 months ago. So welcome, and we're delighted to have you here.
Thank you. I will say that, Monique Laconge-Ziesenhenny, the library director. I will comment that Maine is, in terms of construction, is on time and
Under budget.
And, well, at least on budget. And certainly we intend for it to open sometime by the end of 2014. So just so you know. I have at 2014, sorry. I do have at Places a presentation with some background information, and I can just briefly go through, this arose, I think, from a comment from Councilmember Klein, who has definitely owned up to it in other public venues, long before I arrived at the city, but made the suggestion that when construction was done, perhaps we would want to consider renaming Main Library. The Library Commission, over 2 meetings, looked at different options and made the recommendation for Rinconada based on geographical location. This was confirmed by the PAHA board in June of this year, and then came to council in September. And council referred it to Policy and Services for further discussion. There are a few policy considerations that I wanted to clarify from the presentation. The city's renaming policy does allow buildings to be renamed for historically significant people. There had been some question by others about whether or not that was even acceptable, and certainly it is. Policy refers, normally the plan is, or the way the policy reads, council refers the renaming idea to the relevant commissions. They may come up with a suggestion which goes through the PAHA board and then comes back to council for approval. We're sort of doing that a little bit backwards, but I just wanted to let you know that you're not bypassing policy or anything like that. It has gone through steps, and certainly you could refer any suggestions back to the Library Commission and go through the process as stated in the policy. And then one of the issues to consider, the Palo Alto Library Foundation, their fundraising plan specified room names, and in fact the possibility that if someone were a large enough donor, they could have naming rights to the facilities in question. Their official fundraising ends at the end of this year.
Could I ask, were there any extremely large donors?
There was a donor of $1.5 million, a foundation, Becky Morgan Foundation, the Family Foundation, which it does have the children's area in Mitchell Park, which by square footage is about the same size as Children's Library. So you can get a sense of how large a space that is. And then again, PAL fundraising is scheduled to end at the end of this year. So we're seeking direction. We would love, if you want to make a suggestion, you could use that. You could send it back through the policy, or through the policy route. We could do something where we allow community members to weigh in a sort of crowdsourcing model and bring back other recommendations. You could accept the previous recommendation. You could retain the name Maine, or perhaps there's another solution that I have not even considered. So I'm happy to answer any questions for you. I'm happy
Monica,
to-
could I just ask you, thank you very much, but just ask you to run through this once more?
Sure.
You're indicating we had something, so that we can have a discussion that
Sure.
kind of ties all in together. And thank you, Sheila, who met with me for some time before this meeting tonight. So we have down under policy implications that should the council decide to pursue renaming the library for a person of historical interest, they would need to override the policy requirements. Are you saying that you could override the policy requirements, but actually going back to the committee as well as to PAHA would be more advisable? I'm
That is,
asking for your judgment.
yeah. You could override it. I think my sense is from both of those organizations, we made a recommendation or we accepted a recommendation. You didn't like that. I think they would go back and approve it if it was part of the process. I do know that the LAC discussed, well, if it came back, what if we sent Rinconada back to them? So there is some of that.
So LAC was quite definitive on Rinconada, correct?
They did, yes, they
Yeah.
did appreciate,
Okay.
yeah.
And PAHA was comfortable with that as well?
They were.
Okay. Are there any clarification questions, Larry? I know you want to get started since this was your suggestion, but any other clarity that we need?
Yeah, well, don't read my mind, please.
I didn't think I was reading your mind. I thought I was.
I'm just referring to the process here. I want to go back to what the council voted on, which is a little different than what staff has said so far. It's at the top of page 2. What the council, thank you, voted was to say to refer this item to Policy and Services Committee. We're here with directions that they work with the Palo Alto Historical Association to bring a recommendation to the council to rename the main library for a distinguished person in Palo Alto history, or to recommend the continued use of the name main library if an appropriate individual cannot be determined. That's much narrower than, or more specific, I should say, than what staff has been suggesting. In other words, our mandate is to, if we can, to find a distinguished person in Palo Alto history to recommend that name. And so I think what we're doing is consistent with the process that we have for names, and I don't have any problem if we come up with a name to run it by the Historical Association. Their role in this so far, as they see it, has been very passive. They see themselves as approving, not suggesting. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Any other clarification questions? Gail?
Maybe I'm reading into this, but maybe not. On page 3, under the LAC and staff have no specific recommendations for naming. The bottom point, when it talks about past foundation requests for building support, you mean the Palo Alto Library Foundation, correct?
No, actually, I'm sorry, that's not clear. Other foundations outside of the library. So I know that other foundations have made requests for naming where the foundation themselves specified how the name could be used. So we are not accepting money from a foundation, but I wanted to make you aware of the fact that sometimes those, you know,
It's happened.
yeah.
So that was my question, assuming that this was not the library found, if it's another foundation, we have no way of knowing then, if we were to consider the name of a historical figure whose family happens to have a foundation using the same name, we have no, if we get to that point, we have no way of knowing if there would be any restrictions on the use of that name or not. Is that correct?
We assume that they would be happy to have a library, you know, honoring their family member with that name, but that's correct. I suppose there could be some issue that would come up. It could. I'm just saying that, you know, this is in some of the research. It's been mentioned that some people like to control where their name appears.
And I think it's an excellent point, and the way it was phrased was a little bit confusing. at the
Yeah,
end,
it was
but-
a hard one to,
But I guess we would need to be mindful of that if we got to the point where that kind of research had to be done. Okay, thank you.
So I think just to reiterate what we have said, both looking at the policy, depending on how you interpret it, but also reading what Councilmember Klein just read, which was either rename this for a distinguished figure or recommend the continued use of the name Main Library, if an appropriate individual can't be determined. So with that, have at it, committee. Larry, do you want to start, since this was apparently your suggestion?
Well, I do have now, as you can, going back to that motion, I did have some support from other colleagues on the council. I think there are a number of people whose names that I would find appropriate, and I'm sorry to say this, but I think that I feel that the staff really doesn't like this idea. I mean, there's some very obvious names, and I think it might have been appropriate really to, and I agree that you certainly need permission or at least acceptance from the families. And it might, I think it would have been better if those people had been approached, because I think the names are pretty obvious. And it hasn't, so we were sort of working, I think, from the wrong end of things. But I think some of our colleagues have thrown out names, and I'm glad to throw out 3 that I think would be appropriate, and there may be others that I think might be very acceptable. The 3 that come readily to my mind are David Packard, Bill Hewlett, and Russell Lee. And there might be other ones, but to me, the principle is more important than the actual name. I think that we've had the good fortune to have any number of distinguished Palo Altans who've made significant contributions to society, and we do not honor them. And I think that now is an very appropriate time to honor them. And I do have to note that this is a process that's really going back to something that we did before. When we built the park that's now called Johnson Park in downtown North and the city manager's neighborhood, the council at that point went out with the same idea that I've just expressed, that we wanted to find some distinguished Palo Alton to name that after. And I don't recall specifically, but I think it was the Historical Association then taking a more active role that came up with the name of Frances Johnson, who was the first female OBGYN in the area and delivered thousands of babies and so forth, and apparently had a very distinguished career. This is a person who lived, maybe you know, Karen, but sort of in the era 1895 to 1915 or so.
I think a little bit later, but I could be wrong.
But anyway, it's that era.
And I think she also lived in the neighborhood. I think she lived on Hawthorne or Everett, one or the other.
I think that's correct, by the way. I remember hearing she lived right in that area.
Anyway.
I want to congratulate Sheila. It worked. You got Jim to sit in the trick chair.
Obviously, my chiropractor ordered it.
I told him I switched it when we left the room.
So, Larry, were you done for the moment?
I'm done for the moment. I just wanted to throw out some ideas and see what everybody else has to say.
Okay, who would like to go next? I'm glad to go next, you guys, because I'll just put it right out there. I think, I've lived here a long time, and I think that, one can't always identify the exact reason why they feel attached to something. I happen to be attached to Main Library. I was there first. I remember going to that library when, I'd first come here, and then, if you recall, City Hall was also there, and so forth. And it was a part of town I was very familiar with. When I was getting my master's, I went and studied there. And I feel strongly about Main Library. But the rest of you may feel quite differently and want to come up with a name. I find it, as much as Packard has been extremely influential in this community, he did live in Los Altos. And I think there are probably so many things named after David Packard, we could hardly mention them. Somehow Russell Lee doesn't resonate because I think of Dr. Lee is so involved with the clinic and so forth. And you had one other name you put out. Well, I would say that's the same as Packard. They both have enormous foundations. They both, I find it interesting that we're discussing naming something after a family that gave no money to the library, as I understand. In that case, you might think of the Becky Morgan Library if she gave money to one of the libraries. But I'm putting that out there as clearly Larry and I are not on the same lily pad in this discussion. But I think for those reasons, I feel that we will have Mitchell Park. Mitchell Park was Mitchell Park when I moved here, which is getting longer and longer ago. And, many of the parks certainly are named, but something about the library seems to me to have something special about it. How about giving one of your colleagues a chance first? Because Gail had her hand up.
No.
I'm sorry, it was Karen, excuse me.
I have a comment after Karen and Gail.
Well, if we're talking about lily pads, I tend to be on the same one as Liz on this one. I'm not dissuaded to keep Main Library, and I think naming things for people is a great idea. It's a wonderful opportunity. I have to agree with Liz on these particular names that I don't see them resonating with the library, and the same thing at Packard and Gillett, that they have many things named for them, so I don't think it's that they have not been honored in one way or another. I haven't been able to come up with, there's the Guy Miller Archives, or I was gonna mix up, Guy Miller, Bill Miller Archives. Guy Miller Archives. But the archives are named for him. I don't know that you wanna name the whole library for him. So trying to come up with somebody who you would kind of associate with the library or libraries, in the community, I think is pretty tough. That's my experience, at least. So I haven't been able to come up with, one of the council members mentioned Edward Terrell Stone, because he's the architect of that library and some other significant buildings in this one, in the community. But I don't know that that's particularly relevant for the community either. So I'm kind of, at this point in time, I'm with Main Library.
Gail, I'm sorry, I miscalled on you before.
That's okay. I think I'm coming down on sort of where Councilmember Klein is on this. I feel like, although there is kind of long association with the name Maine, there's part of me that says, well, can't the city of Palo Alto do better than that? And I think we can. The question is, what is the appropriate name? I think the three names that were raised, all are reasonable candidates. I do believe it would be ideal if we had someone sort of more associated with the library per se, but from what I'm hearing, I don't know of a name like that in particular. So, although that is ideal, certainly, but I feel like it would be very distinguished to have a library in this community named after an individual. who has had an important role in, certainly in the valley or within this immediate area, within the Palo Alto, area. I think if we become too restrictive, then the list will become shorter and shorter and shorter, because I don't think we've really had a discussion of criteria per se, because I think it's still a pretty fluid process here as we talk about it. But I'm supportive of naming this wonderful library after an individual. Because I think, Maine, it has nothing to do with kind of the history here. The name doesn't do anything for me as an individual in Palo Alto, and we've all been to libraries all over the place. And I do think that really, it's quite common to have it named after an individual.
Before you do that, I know Jim has wanted to say something.
No, I'll wait, I'll defer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Larry was in line before you were, Karen.
I want to hear what Jim had to say.
Karen seemed like she had some, no,
I'll go,
all
yeah.
Well, maybe I'll say something again.
right. Well, all right, I'll go ahead and get what he said, because I only have one thing to say.
Herb, I know you do want to speak.
I'm not going to really add a lot of value to this, but
Yeah, but
maybe we
turn
could
right
add
after
E
him.
to the end, and that would just throw everybody
I
off
was
for a
gonna-
while.
yeah,
Everyone go, why did they do that? What does that
Because of
mean?
our close connections with the state of Maine.
But seriously, I did want to respond to Councilmember Klein's initial comment about the prep for this. So it's a good point. I would also say, though, this is an awkward predicament, I think, for the staff. I think that we can help with developing criteria for you to think about. I think we could do follow-up with PAHA or other entities if there's more research on suggestions. But I do feel in this case, this is really something much more as the council, as the representatives of the people, that it's just awkward for the staff to be thinking about who we might leave out, for example, if we brought a list. Now, that being said, my own view is that there should be some, as other people have said, some association with the libraries or what libraries symbolize or mean in our society and an individual than maybe just a person and just sort of saying this happens to be a building or something that lasts for a long time in the city that we want to name after somebody. And so trying to think about how expansive we could be about what a library signifies might trigger ideas ultimately about who might connect to those, and you guys would know that better than me. I mean, obviously there's learning and there's knowledge, but in human society, I mean, libraries have played a really important role, and certainly in a democracy there, and in our country in particular, there's a lot of reasons for, I mean, often called the free library and those sorts of things for lots of different reasons. So that it certainly seems that there are a lot of potential individuals who have connections to those deeper purposes of what a library is about and why libraries have fought so hard to maintain their purpose and their identity and still sort of be beacons for whatever, civil liberties or, independent thinking or whatever it is in our society. And there is this opportunity to sharpen that and remind everybody of that purpose if you could link it with an individual. I mean, that does have some value.
Before we do another round, Herb is waiting to speak, and I imagine he'll have some historical comments.
Thank you, Chairness, and good evening. So far, it looks like a 2-2 vote, and as has happened in committees before, when it's 2-2, you forward it to the council without a recommendation. And then if all 9 council members are present, maybe they can make a decision. The council has had a policy for naming for some time and for renaming. The renaming policy was added at the time of proposal to rename the Arastadero Preserve. The renaming policy requires a compelling reason to rename a facility. And I don't believe that the reasons the Councilmember Klein has given, or Councilmember Price, are compelling reasons. At one time, I recall the Historical Association came before the council to rename a street for Mr. Packard, and that it didn't happen because Mr. Klein was opposed to it because it wasn't a big enough honor to do so. You have received in your staff report a copy of the policy and also a copy of the naming opportunity schedule from the Library Foundation campaign, which for gifts of between $1 million and $2 million, in addition to the Kids Place at the New Mitchell Park, would also have naming opportunity for the multi-purpose event room at the community center and the new wing of the main library. And the staff report at that time, where that those two items were attached back in May 2010, was that if someone came forward with a substantial gift to rename a building, then the council would decide on that, but no such substantial gift has come forward. The first step in a naming policy is for someone to fill out the appropriate form and process it that way. So even the starting of the process of a comment from a council member. I believe, considering that the Library Foundation came before the council also following a policy for a fundraising campaign that was added to the council's policy and procedures for naming, and solicited money throughout the community for naming, and now then suddenly to come forward and change a name on one of these building projects that would require a contribution more substantial than the one from the Morgan Foundation. I don't believe it is a good idea, and for your relationships for future organizations like the Library Foundation. And since there is no compelling reason, it doesn't follow the policy. And if you want to do something different from the policy, then you would need to go back to do exactly what happened in the case of the Arostadero Preserve. Change your policy first, and then implement the policy. And just for a side note, the people who insisted that there should be a new policy for renaming, when there wasn't a renaming policy before, as I recall, it was council members Kleinberg and Mosser, when the renaming came forward, voted against the renaming. And that renaming was just an addition to the existing name, the Arostadero Preserve. So I think if it's 2-2, just forward it to the council without recommendation. But my personal opinion is that there is no compelling reason under the existing policy, and for this particular type of building, you should not do it at all because of the fundraising campaign that the Library Foundation had done. Thank you.
Thanks, Herb, and thanks for those reminders. Let me insert one thing. I actually thought Rinconada was a terrific renaming possibility. Otherwise, I'm wondering if we're going to have to rename the downtown library, the College Terrace Library, and so forth, all of which.
But they did weigh in once, so I sort of feel like we're circling the wagons again around the camp that we've already visited. So I won't be supporting the motion either. I think of names, I look at, okay, our street names in the Professorville area, they're named after authors, you know, Bryant, Emerson, Waverly, you know, blah, blah, blah. But how do you pick something out of that? For instance, you know, there's not a way. I mean, Authors Library, I mean, that's a game, a card game. So, anyway, I read the motion somewhat differently and think that we don't need to continue this discussion, and I'm fine with keeping the name Main Library.
So, with that, I think we will then report back to the full council that we have deadlocked on this particular item. And Sheila, I'm sorry you won't be here for the next meetings when we continue on with this discussion. Okay, in that case, we are going to move on to the next item. And Jim, I appreciate your being here tonight. And I know you want to be excused, correct? Yes, good. And thank you for coming. Okay, we now have a year-end update to the benefits audit. Kathy Shen is here to walk us through that.
Good evening, committee members. Kathy Shen, Chief People Officer. So this is a report. I want to make sure it's an informational report. No action is required by the committee. So I think the last time we talked about the benefits audit,
I'm going to grab a cough drop
I said I
in
would come
the
back
other room.
before the end of the year and give an update, and so that's what this report is. I'm really happy to say it's been a very positive outcome, although I have a few more gray hairs after the audit, but I think HR requested this audit over a year ago to really get in front of the benefits administration issue, as CalPERS was not willing or able to administer the various retiree health plans, and it really fell on our staff to do the administration. So we have worked carefully with the audit team and our ASD to put in place new systems. I'm also happy to report that the new systems we've put in place will be continued. We have a new responsible kind of single point accountable person. That's my new manager of benefits, Brenna Rowe, who is in the audience today, and I'm really happy to have extended the offer to her, and she's accepted. There will be a bit of a transition time because Brenna is currently on our bargaining team for SEIU bargaining, and she will begin in January really full-time doing the benefits, and she will be supported by one of our HR representatives, Angelica Jimenez, who is also a new hire. Angelica has been an intern with us for 6 months and has been very solidly working with Sandra Blanche, my assistant director, to put together all of the policies to complete the audit. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Well, we can carry on. Gail?
Could you just, thank you for your presentation. Could you just clarify for me the role of the EBS? This is a vendor who's to ensure the adequacy of the contract terms,
So,
et cetera?
so
could you explain?
EBS is a third-party vendor, and they actually pay our retirees. They cut the checks for our retirees. So, depending on what group the retiree is in, which is dictated by when they started employment and when they retired and what employment group they're in, what union or non-union, they're entitled to a certain percentage of their health care. Some have 100%, some have 100% of the highest plan, some have 90%. And CalPERS treats our retirees as if they get the minimum payment, and then we have to reimburse the retirees. So the third-party vendor, EBS, actually does the reimbursement.
Okay, just a quick question regarding the retirees. The questions have come up by retirees, concerns, needs for clarification, if there have been any errors that have been made over time. How is that currently handled? Because I understand there have been questions about this by retirees. So what's the process specifically to handle that or to clarify if there have been any errors or concerns about that?
So I will let Sandra Blanche, my assistant director, talk to that.
Good evening, council members. Sandra Blanche, Assistant Director of the People's Strategy and Operations Department. The retirees are able to call EBS for assistance, response to any questions. We do have on the city's website a link titled Retirees, which we didn't have before. It gives all of the contact information, not only for EBS, but for CalPERS. It also gives a diagram of the whole reimbursement process. I think a few of you have even been contacted by some of our former council members on the complexity and why the process had to change. So providing that information on our website has been very helpful for retirees to know not only who to contact, but what level of benefit they're entitled to depending on their retirement date. Because we do have 4 groups of retiree medical benefits, which just adds to the questions that we get. What am I entitled to? What do I have to pay for dependents or not pay? Now, if the retirees find that EBS has not been able to respond to their questions, then they're able to contact our office, and we will review the EBS records. We also have access to review the MyCalPERS system, which outlines not only what retirement income a retiree receives, but also what deductions CalPERS is making from the retirement. So we put together the puzzle in order to respond to retirees' questions.
Thank you. And I have one last question. For the outstanding items, it looks like a lot of progress has been made on, my gosh, out of the 20, many, I think 16 have been accomplished. Is there a sense here, and maybe I missed it in looking at this, is there a time frame or a schedule for resolving those kind of in your thinking about the outstanding items? Do you anticipate?
There's actually, as of today, only one item outstanding, and we anticipate closing that out by the end of the year. So your At Places memo gives you the updated spreadsheet.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Klein.
Well, I'm glad to hear we've made progress, and for those one member of the committee that wasn't on the committee a year ago, a lot of this was triggered by complaints that we received from former council members Ann Witherspoon and Ellen Fletcher, now deceased, but that they were not getting their appropriate payments, and that they were having to go through this kludge of a system, which we still are forced to do, but where they have to get reimbursed by the city after having too much money taken out by CalPERS. And so I'm glad we're seeing progress. And well, let me check the progress. Are we getting any letters of complaint?
We have not received any letters of a complaint. We still do have a handful of retirees who raise questions, primarily when they move into Medicare. Their change in their CalPERS warrant is not in real time, so it takes a month or 2 for CalPERS to adjust the deduction, but we have not had any complaints.
Good, good. And I know this is wishful thinking on my part. Is there any hope that we can get CalPERS to resolve this so that they can do it through their computer system rather than having to go back and forth between theirs and ours?
I don't see that in the future, no. I think CalPERS is pretty dug into this situation where they pay the PEMCA minimum and the agency has to do the administration.
Do we have any knowledge of how other states handle this problem?
I have not researched how other states handled it. I have just been appointed to the Employee Relations Committee of the California League of Cities, and there is a CalPERS subcommittee that I'm on. So actually, just today, I reached out to the subcommittee members saying, hey, what are we going to do about this? Can we group together? So there's working through that end of the political process, I think, is the way to go.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
I'm getting confused between. I'm sorry. Now that I have two copies of the same thing, I can't figure out which one is which. Going back to the statement on page 2 of the report, I think. Yes, here's my writing. I'm confused by the statement in the top of page 2, the last sentence that says, the city deducts the negotiated employee share of health care premium payments from employees' paychecks. Currently, and this is my question, currently 10% of the total cost up to the amount of the second highest plan.
So that's for active employees.
I understand that, but I don't think that's accurate. Let me go through it, and then maybe I'm being inaccurate. As I understand it right now, employees are paying 10% of the cost of the plan. If they're in the if they're in the second highest cost plan, they pay 10%. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if it costs $900 a month, the city pays $810. They pay $90.
That's right.
Okay, but this, I think, says something very different. If an employee chooses to be in the highest paid plan, and let's say it costs $1,000 a month, that employee would be paying, as I understand it, $90 of the first $900, and then all of the difference, the 100 between the 900 and 1,000. So that person would be paying $190.
That's correct.
The parenthesis, I think, says 10% of the total cost.
Up to a cap of the amount of 90% of the second highest plan.
Right, but that's not what. If you do the math, if you my employee who's chosen the highest cost plan for $1,000, if you apply that, what your formula there, all that person would be paying is 10% of $1,000, $100, up to the cost of the second highest plan, which is $900, but that's not applicable.
So I understand how you have read that. You know, maybe we didn't. Maybe we should have continued by saying that.
I think you have to. Because it's not that I'm not trying to be persnickety on this, but the public reads this, and I want to make sure that they don't think that it's a different number than what we've actually negotiated with our unions.
So I can assure you that we actually only have one employee who's in the highest cost plan for actives, and that employee is paying the difference.
The 190 in my theoretical.
Correct.
Yeah. So please go back and rework that so it takes into account all of the little subtleties that we have. I have one other question. Oh, you've already answered it. That is that of the last two, since we had two that were due to be done by December 31st, and which is the one that got completed now?
The amendment to the contract with EBS. We refined the scope of services.
And the other one, the review of previous retirees' records, et cetera?
That is in progress.
We're going to finish it in just 2 weeks?
We believe so. We've hit a little snag with some of our current records, but we will have to review by name instead of by CalPERS ID number.
Cal. They do have computers up there, right? Thank you.
Karen? So, congratulations on getting basically complete with this. I do have a question for the auditor's office. Is it typical, well, for you and the auditor's office, Is it typical that once you've crossed these milestones, that the auditor comes back in and double checks that everything's done to the auditor's office's satisfaction as well? And perhaps you'd like to come and speak to that, and you'll need a microphone. There we go.
Squeaky chair.
Nobody wants this chair.
Nobody wants to sit beside you, Sheila.
Human Busin, acting city auditor. Yes, as part of the audit process, we do follow up on the status of recommendations, and we do look to see how departments are completing the recommendations. In this instance, HR PSO proactively wanted to provide this update, and we were part of the process with them to do this earlier than we would have.
And if you were signing off, your initials would be beside all this, that you're satisfied with the completion status?
Yes, staff and our office, we have looked at these, and I've personally looked at to some extent the procedures, and we are satisfied.
Then it's double congratulations. It's nice to have the checks and balances. It's great to have that, because sometimes we get so close to our own work, we can't see it. There's that aspect of it, so that's why we have an auditor's office, and I appreciate the cooperation that obviously is.
We can testify to the going back and forth between the 7th floor and the mezzanine in terms of trying to tick and tie all of these. So the current status is completed. That actually is from the auditor's office. So I wanted to make sure that they agreed when something was done.
That's outstanding. Then I have one, maybe it's applicable and maybe it's just it's so obvious. So you have the EBS, that you work with. Is there any part of this that is plugged into SAP? Is there any part of this that's a part of that? In other words, have we taken advantage of the tools that we have at hand? And
Well,
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, we have all our employee data of record in SAP. That's our system of record. So what's required is to compare the data that's in SAP with the data that's in CalPERS. That is part of these audit procedures that we now have regular reviewing both reports. Unfortunately, they're not on the same system, and so they have to be reviewed point by point.
And are there any efficiencies that the auditor's office or your office have been able to identify how to make that smoother? Is it just different systems, different programs, and so we have what we have?
That particular type of efficiency was not, and Yuki, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but it wasn't within the scope of our audit. Of course, we always encourage departments to look for opportunities to do that, but that was not something that was within our scope.
Okay. And back to you, to the both of you, have you identified any ways to be more efficient within SAP?
We have joined with the Administrative Services Department to purchase a new software tool called SpinFX. I think I talked about it a few months ago. And SpinFX is a reporting tool that will help us pull the right data from SAP, so it will make the comparison with the CalPERS data easier. Now, we just have started using it and gone through training, so we're still on a learning curve with SpinFX, but that's one of the big reasons we wanted that tool, is to make this process easier.
I do remember that now, but thank you for the reminder. I think those are my questions, and thank you.
All set? So the only comment I would make, and as Larry has said, I wasn't here when you started this process, but I would just repeat my frustration at working with CalPERS and the fact that CalPERS doesn't allow us to develop a wellness program that would in some way alter what our premiums are, regardless of whether it's the actives or the retired or whatever it may be. And so that would lead me to the question, and as I said, congratulations. I think getting out and about and having that kind of contact makes all the difference. But if there is a group like that, and that group is as frustrated with CalPERS and their lack of understanding that the entire world is going in that direction of wellness, I would think that might be an obvious place to start that persuasion. Or maybe not, I don't know, because CalPERS is tough to overcome. But at the same time, there's more and more discussion of this, especially in other jurisdictions where the healthcare is provided.
Duly noted. That is on my list of things I would like to be able to get other agencies to help change in CalPERS. Definitely.
I think that's the only way it's going to happen is if there's that strength in numbers and commitment. Okay, anything else on this anyone wants to add?
The crickets.
Okay, and that would take us then to
Thank you.
number 3, which is discussion, which is the boards and commissions application provisions. And we have the clerk's office here, including Donna, who will be hobbling up. Would that they stop that tickle.
Yeah.
Welcome, Donna, Beth. We appreciate your being here. We know that this was your idea. This was something you have. Yell at me, somebody, when my mic's not on. I should know because it echoes, so. This, I think, was a terrific idea. I also know tonight you might want to report on your November 7th event after you go through this. But this is our chance tonight to look at the applications revisions, and I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Chair Ness and the Policy and Services Committee. This is the final step in our changes to the process for the board and commission recruitments that we're excited about to revive and to reach out to the community to get interested people committed to help and volunteer for the city. And just before I step into this, if I may, we did have a successful event on November 7th recognizing our existing board and commission members. It was a great turnout, and I was really pleased. And I think we had a pretty good turnout of council members. I think we had 6 out of the 9 that attended. And they, on a football night, Stanford, yes. And it was over at the Lucy Stern. And the council members presented proclamations to the board and commission members and said kind words. And I think it was really, a lot of people came up afterwards and really were happy and excited to be recognized. And I think that's a good thing. That's what we should do. And I want to, let's take a wild guess, about 50?
I'd say 50.
I'd say about 50. I mean, it was a pretty good turnout. It was a, it might have been more. I don't have a full count, but it was exciting.
Some of you there.
Yeah.
Larry, you were
Gail and I.
game? So, do either of you want to make comments? Because that was a first, and I think a great idea.
I thought it was extremely well done. People seem very pleased and engaged. Everyone likes to feel appreciated, and in this community, sometimes that's very hard to feel that way. And so I think it was great. One member of one of the commissions, who is not on a commission now, did say that apparently this did used to happen quite some time ago, maybe 15, 20 years, give or take.
Yes, that's true.
So that she was quite thrilled to see it happen again. I do have just a quick question on this. Her observation was, and I don't know how challenging this would be, for all the people that have served in the last 15 years, would it be a hugely difficult task to send appreciation certificates to them after the fact? This is just a general question. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but given that for anyone who really serves seriously here. It does require quite a commitment. So I don't know, I just wanted to kind of, in general, ask that quick question and see what your thinking might be.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, that's a lot for the last 15 years. I mean, I've just, words don't even come to mind. I know that, I don't know if it's been happening lately, but I want to get back a relationship between us and the candidates and council and the liaisons. So I know the liaisons would bring forward resolutions of appreciation
Right.
as they left. And I don't think that's been happening lately. And I think that's a way to start recognizing. I don't know that I can go back 15 years.
Yeah.
But I think what I want to do, like I said, when I get this relationship building, is get the liaisons and follow up. My department can definitely follow up to make sure it occurs, to get resolutions of appreciation. And this is, I mean, this was so successful. I think, we're going to be moving forward, and it's going to be, good, and it's going to be set in motion. And yes, it happened years ago, but I'm glad to say it's back, and it's really went well.
Maybe, that might be more appropriate, but, given the amount of time that people spend, I just thought I'd ask that general question. I know that covers a lot of people. But thank you very much. I thought it was well done.
Were you next, Karen?
Well, I was the only one
I didn't
there.
see whose wave went up.
Well, go ahead, Karen.
So, and I'll be brief here. I thought it also was a very successful event. I think it was really important for those who could, council members, to be there. And it was a weeknight, so not everybody's always ever going to be able to all be there. But I think that's a very important piece of it. I think also the critical staff people were there too, as well as the board and commission members. I think that was really important too.
Yes.
Because that's a relationship that's ongoing
Yes.
and such. So I think that was really, really good. There was one commission where there was only one person there, and it was a person who actually just left that commission. So whatever caused that to happen, if it was less outreach, or the staff liaison didn't reach out enough or make enough point, whatever that was, if you can find out why that may have happened, that would be a good learning experience for this event. But overall, I think it was really nice. You did a nice job setting up and getting everybody checked in.
Thank you.
So it was
Thank you.
very nice.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to see it back. Sorry you conflicted with the Stanford, Oregon football game. But it gets me to a broader point than that. Is that I would hope that we could have it, where we used to have it is at Foothill Park in a
I know.
summer afternoon or whatever, and I think that's works better. I don't remember whether it was on a weekend or not. I don't think so, but
I remember it was at Foothills. It was like when I first came to the city that we had the firefighters
yes, that was what
doing the barbecue,
Yes.
and it was at the Foothills, and it was really cool because
Yeah.
who can't like the Foothills? It's beautiful.
Well, people brought some.
Or the firefighters. There you go.
But I thought Gail had an interesting idea that I don't think we want to do that on a yearly basis, but every once in a great while to bring back the alums.
Yes.
And I don't want to get too far out, but the 125th anniversary of the city is coming up in 5 years.
Okay.
So
Can you write
maybe in 2019,
Really?
guaranteed.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
That's a great
they
idea.
invite a lot of people back, right? Yeah.
That's a good idea. I would like to.
The 150th?
25th.
Oh, 125th, I misheard you.
Trying to figure out if I'm in the right place. Is this the planning commission meeting?
No,
Keep
this is
going.
Stuart.
Thank you, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
So would you like me to go into the rest of what we're here for tonight? Yes?
I was going to say something as well. Do you remember how many you invited?
Well, we invited,
I'm trying to think, how many live commissioners do we have right now?
I know the commission that did not is the Park and Rec, and I want to take some of the responsibility for that. No, I don't, because I want to follow up, and so I don't want that to happen again. I want to,
Get included?
well, they did get included, but I don't know the reason why they weren't there, but I think if I would have gone myself to Greg Betts and said, hey, Greg, can you look into, and I think we would have so I think, it's a learning experience. Maybe they were all at the Stanford game, I don't know. But, it's one of those things as looking forward to do, because I would like to see, because I think it was received so well with the council members doing that. It's a nice touch.
Well, I really am so pleased that you did it. I think everyone loves to be thanked, but I think also they love rubbing shoulders with each other and having casual conversations and a chance to, I presume you had food and drink and so forth.
And they were networking really well, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you put a whole group of people who are really interested in your community together, give them that opportunity to schmooze in a way they don't normally get to do so. And I think that makes a huge difference in the kind of conversations we have internally within our city. Karen?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that's one of the most important aspects of this kind of event is, as you're saying, that the different board and commission members can get to know each other because, I mean, I'm all in favor of trying to promote over the years, and sometimes it's worked well, is to cross-pollinate the boards and commissions because some of their jurisdictions, if you will, overlap. So the more they get to know each other and starts communication, I think the city's gonna be better for it.
Totally. I totally agree. Totally agree.
So, bravo.
Thank
So
you.
now, let's go on to our actual boards and commissions applications revisions. And as you recall, we've had two council members who have worked on this, Karen and Gail, for quite some time. But go back to you, to one of the two of you, to do an intro and where we are at this point and so forth.
Well, moving forward, council has already determined that and we've changed the municipal code for recruitments to be twice a year. And, one of the last final things to be used towards that program, correct my English here, I'm sorry, is revise the applications, because they were stale. They've been around before I came here 15 years ago, so it was time to look at those and look at what we did. So we brought to you on October 8th, after the committee's recommendations for revising the applications, and what came out of that meeting that was to look at reducing the questions, looking at the way the questions were presented, to look at a friendlier greeting in the beginning, basically revise the application to be user-friendly, inviting, to get people to come, and to eliminate, there was one concern that was brought up about eliminating the 2-mile requirement for conflict of interest. We took that out because Molly was here at that meeting and said, it was stale. Who knows where it came from, but it's gone. And it's in here, and a lot of work was by Councilmember Price and Holman on this project, and so we've come up with what we feel is a good product.
Could I ask just one question? We were, in fact, thanks to Sheila, we went through a lot of this afternoon. Does it indicate on each of these how many people are on whatever board or commission it is? I didn't see it jump out at me, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, it does. Like if you go to the first application for Architecture Review Board, halfway through the page where it says right underneath, please see Palo Alto, its Architecture Review Board is composed of 5 members, right?
Yes, thanks. For some reason,
I
it
know.
just wasn't jumping out. I appreciate that.
This is just mine. Oh, okay, sorry. Thinking, what?
Ever want a suggestion for the future, for those like me that didn't happen to see it jump out? You might just bold it.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I just wanted to add briefly, Molly asked me, who was not able to be here tonight, to share with you one of the referrals from the last Policy and Services Committee was to have Molly come back with a work plan and a schedule and a resource impact for updating the Muni Code for a number of the areas that you brought up, Karen, in the email before the last committee meeting for us. She wanted me to convey that her staff is working on those. She does anticipate coming back in the February timeframe. She thought that there are a number of very easy fixes that she would propose at that time. They would require code ordinance revisions, which would have to go to council, and that she would anticipate coming back also with some of those areas that would require some more substantial policy discussion and decision, along with a work plan and a schedule and the resource impact to do that work at the same time.
And if I understood correctly, I think some of the things that were pointed out were just like basic cleanup, and I think that several of those have already taken place.
could I speak to that? That, when you say cleanup,
I realized my mic wasn't on, so.
what we've done isn't municipal code changes. There was some web pages updates on descriptions that don't have to come from a code change. So coming out of our last meeting, I worked with Aaron Atkin, who was the acting department head at that time for planning, and we already have updated those suggestions that you had. He agreed to them from your memo, and those are done. Those are already on the web page.
So if there's anything we missed, please let us know. But anything, even small fixes, though, to the Muni code would have to come back to council and be heard twice. Yeah.
Like, for instance, one of the things that happened was I identified, just in the course of doing this, because Councilor Price learned too, is like doing this actually was a lot of work. But there was one place, in particular instance, where there was a piece of code that was referenced, but when you go to it, there was nothing there. So that's been fixed. I mean, things like that, just basic cleanup. So thanks for taking care of that. Thank you, Sheila.
Gail, do you want to comment?
Just,
As part of the two-person committee?
that's right. I think one of the goals, and I think Donna has mentioned this, was to make this more understandable and more accessible to an applicant. There was a lot of, there was a little jargonistic in the past, a lot of overlap, a little too stiff, very legalistic. Sometimes you felt like whole sections of the municipal code had been dropped in the middle of the paragraph. So I think that there was certainly some effort to try to make that kind of an easier experience. And we want to encourage people to apply for these important positions. So I think that we hope that we were successful in doing that. But I think the changes have been good, and I hope that the committee agrees. Just one last thing as part of the two-person committee is the only thing that occurred to me, and you know how you can look at these things 50 million times, and then the only thing that occurred to me was the paragraph, which I like, that's the last paragraph on page 1 currently, the way it's formatted, is if that paragraph would be best at the top, so that you're actually inviting people to participate. It's just a suggestion or a thought, something that I noticed after reading these 15 times.
Suggestion to whom? You're the author.
Well,
Or the co-author.
recommending. So I'll wait and see what other people think about it. My personal thought is that it would be better at the top, but I'll wait and see what other people think.
I agree with you. It ought to be at the top. And thank you, Gail and Karen. I think that this is not an easy task, and I think we've really got something that's a lot better. And I don't want to try to edit any more than we've done in the past, so I think we're ready to go. My question is, looking at the very first item on the cover sheet, that the recommended action is that we recommend that the council approve the revised boards and commission applications. Do we really need to have council approval of applications? Seems like a funny thing for the council really to get involved in. And I recognize nobody's from the city attorney's office is here.
We were obviously under the assumption
No,
that
I
it had
understand.
to
I
get
understand that.
approved.
It didn't occur to me till I said, "Oh, what action are we being asked to do tonight?" And it's just,
Well, I do think it would be important to inform the council of the changes, as it will affect the community and future applications. But so long as there's unanimous approval, it would be an item that would go on consent.
Consent, right.
yeah, I realize it's a small point, and yes, it ought to be on consent, and I can't imagine it's going to be taken off consent. Maybe just somebody note somewhere that, for example, if let's assume that 6 months from now we discover that there's one statement in here that really doesn't work, that confuses people. Who knows what its problem is? And Donna and her staff and maybe this committee all agree that okay, we didn't get that one quite right, and that happens. The idea that it's got to wind its way all the way back through the council before we can make a change in the application seems to me to be really bureaucratic.
I totally agree. I think it was because we were revamping the whole process. We really wanted to get the blessing of the council. So I don't think we should have to go back with,
Well, I would hope that we did.
maybe you could,
But this time, I don't know.
right.
Maybe we ought to put something in the cover sheet just as saying that this is an excess of caution, or or for the council to be fully informed, and here it is.
And, I mean, could I go ahead and say, and in the future, any
Any
minor revisions will be done administratively?
Yeah, yes.
Makes sense, because it does seem ridiculous, really, to bring back everything all the time.
Well, every time we have some motion on the council agenda, it does cost money.
Right, right, right.
Go ahead.
So, understanding that, it's like if it's minor changes, that they can be done administratively. The question that, or the caveat maybe that I have to that is, somehow or other, over time, the applications all became the same, basically. And I don't know how that transition happened, but it did, because when I first was applying for the Planning Commission, there were questions there having to do with the comprehensive plan and blah, blah, blah. And I know that I went back and looked at my applications, and it was there. And somehow or other, it just disappeared over time. Yeah, because I have all my old applications, and it just disappeared. So my caveat is like, what's considered administrative, So I don't think we ought to try to dictate that, but it's just kind of, just a cautionary. So I'm going to say that we would recommend, or move that we recommend the applications, the revised applications to City Council for approval, with the one change being that the paragraph that states Palo Alto welcomes volunteers to the top, underneath the name of the board or commission.
Are you getting a second?
Second.
And Karen, do you want to say any more about it?
Well, a couple of things. One is I enjoyed very much working with Councilmember Price on this, and we had numerous conversations about it, and even had conversation with staff and Councilmember Price over lunch one day. So, we spent a good amount of time on this. I think it's a good product. Nothing's perfect, but I think it's a good product and greatly improved over what we had in the past, and appreciate all the effort that's gone into it on the part of staff and my colleague.
And Gail, you were the second, do you want to comment?
Thank you. I appreciate the remarks, and I think this went quite well.
Councilmember Klein, do you want to add anything? So let me sort of in the tidy up of this say that I guess much of the proof will be in the pudding. Does this work? And I'm thinking last night of somebody, I guess it was Lee, who spoke about the ARB having 3 members on it. And, then they were compromised and felt compromised. And I thought, so we have to keep out in the public the importance of applying, because right now we are pushing toward, we've got an opening on this, we have an opening on that one, or so forth. And so now we're going to have this rotating system. It will take the public a while to get used to it. So I guess I would once again say, how do you intend to keep this out there in such a way that not only the public, but we remember to say to people, don't forget to go online and apply. Or they may apply and then discover they're not called for 2 or 3 years.
Thank you, Chair Nez. I think, with this being a new project, I think it got stale even in our advertising, because if you remember before, we were doing it only in the weekly, because that's what the code said to do. So this is opening up, and I think we're going to try different avenues of how to do this, how to reach out. Not just a little ad in the back of the newspaper. I can see it more as in the front of the paper and taking a more half page or something to say, hey, look, we've got, because we're going to have, 4 or 5 commissions we're going for at the same time. So you don't want to tuck that away at the back. You don't want, and I'm even thinking maybe at the May Fed or something, one of those public, to have a booth or to have something to reach out to the community, to get out there, to be visible. to get.
I met with Claudia Keith the other day, and we discussed how the city is moving from print and so forth, far more toward social media, and different ways that we can reach the public, especially reach the younger public with that type of connection. So what I'd suggest is, would you work with Claudia on this?
Yes.
And if you haven't already,
No, that's a good idea. We will.
and have her discuss that with you, because I think that that can make a big difference.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea.
Have you, and perhaps you have done this, have you brought interns into your office in the summer, or somebody who wants to learn more about us and about communicating and so forth? I say that only because, not dating all of us, but 20-somethings are awfully good at social media, a little better than we are.
Oh, definitely better than I am.
These are just all thoughts, so I'm just kind of,
I love, I mean, we
just
have
kind of
used high school.
throwing some stuff out there.
At one point in the board and commission, it didn't really fly, but we tried by using high schoolers to videotape existing board and commission and putting that online. So, we've done that, but hey, I think.
Yeah,
I agree
whatever
with
gets
you.
the word out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Gail?
Yes, along that line, have you worked with IT in terms of where you would place a link to these applications? Sometimes it's hard to find items. It's a lot better, the website's greatly improved, but a way to kind of drive traffic towards this link so that people are aware, or is there a way to make a reference to this opportunity on a couple, 3 parts of the website? So when people are seeking information under the planning department, for example, or they're looking at some other issues around architecture, is there any way to sort of make it more visible so people will recognize that there's an opportunity?
Thank you, Councilmember Price. Yes, we are going to. The board and commission page now has the listing of all the boards and commissions, and you can click on their link. However, at the top of it now, we're going to redesign it so that it has more information about the new program and links to the current recruitments, and just generally a lot more information so that it draws people in more to it, and it has more visibility than just the links to each of the boards and commissions.
Great.
It's prompted more thoughts.
Sorry, it does bring up one other question. I know that Rana had looked at a variety of different programs that this would be dumped into. And I don't know if you've decided what program you're going to use, but the look of this is going to be important so that it's user-friendly and doesn't, so leave that in your hands, but that is going to be really important.
Thank you.
So, in addition, because not everyone is computer-friendly, believe it or not, I presume they could call you and you'll send them an application.
There's good
Right, yeah.
old-fashioned customer
Yeah.
service that's always up front. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I know, we'd love to think that, what about leaving applications at the libraries?
That's an idea. We
Have you
actually
ever
did
tried it?
bookmarks. We've tried bookmarks before. Volunteer for a board and commission. Those didn't fly as well. They're cute. They were cute. I think we still have them somewhere. We might bring them out again, but it might be getting the applications. Seeing if we can get them put around. Yes. Yes.
I mean, whatever might work, and sometimes odd things work. Volunteer fairs, that
Open
kind
to
of thing.
all suggestions.
Good. Okay, anything to add to this? And if not, there's a motion, and shall we vote? All those in favor? Aye. So, thank you both very much. I know you've done a lot of work on this, and I appreciate it. So, with that, we come to the end of this meeting, and I think the saddest part is we say goodbye to Sheila. And as we were talking today and saying, well, what about next year? And I realize Sheila won't be here next year, and this committee won't be reconstituted until February. And so, because there's not a great deal we could do, you could talk about what's still out there to be done, but I think beyond that, it's going to be very hard to not have your support. It's been terrific.
Thank you, thank you. Well, just briefly, logistically, I wanted to bring up one item on the agenda. You might have noticed that the state lobbyist agreement was pulled from the agenda for this month. I just want to report that there was one additional round of oral interviews that have needed to take place, and those will happen later this month on the 18th. I would like to recommend, staff would like to recommend that we bring back the contract directly to council in January, given the time sensitivity of the 2014 legislative calendar starting in January. We had planned to come back to committee, but given this 1 month delay, I would suggest if there's agreement, we go straight to council in January with a recommendation for the state lobbyist. Is that okay? And just on a personal note, though, I just wanted to share how much of a pleasure it's been to work with all of you over the past 2 years. I really think we've done some incredibly important public policy work here that's really served our community well, and I've been honored to be a part of it and to work with all of you.
Sheila is such an asset, and I know she'll enjoy Santa Clara, and at the same time, as she so kindly said, but it's very hard to leave this special place. So I appreciate that, Sheila, and your being here. So any additional comments, additions, anything?
Thank you for being a great chair this year.
How nice of you. Thank you. Thanks. So with that, if there are no more comments, we're adjourned.